My brother got everything, our family's house in Denver, the savings, the memories we grew up with. I got a rotting cabin deep in Montana, a place I'd never seen, never even heard about. When the lawyer read the will, I didn't cry. I just sat there numb while Jacob smiled like it was all fair. At home, my husband Kyle didn't say much at first. He just stared at me, then said, "So that's what they think of you." I packed my bag that night, not because I wanted to fight, but because I needed to breathe, to understand why my own parents saw less in me, their firstborn daughter, than in the son who never stayed around. The keys to that broken cabin lay heavy in my hand. I didn't know it yet, but that house would lead me back to a truth buried long before I was born. My name is Grace Anderson. I'm 41. I work as a senior accountant in Denver. Nothing flashy, just numbers, spreadsheets, and deadlines. My life quiet, predictable, like a hallway with locked doors I never had time or courage to open. I was raised to be good, to be polite, to smile even when things weren't fair, to let my younger brother speak over me because he's just more outspoken. My parents loved us, sure, but their love had rules. Jacob was the golden boy, the one who didn't have to ask twice. I was the helper, the one who understood when things weren't equal. I learned early that speaking up made people uncomfortable, so I got good at staying quiet. But somewhere along the way, I stopped hearing my own voice, and maybe, just maybe, that's why I had to drive all night toward a place I didn't know to remember who I am. We grew up in a modest home on the east side of Denver. 3 bedrooms, worn-out carpet, the same oak dining table for 20 years. My father, Richard, was a mechanic, quiet, steady. My mother, Diane, taught 2nd grade. She made great chili and never raised her voice. They weren't cruel. They just believed things should be how they've always been. Jacob got second chances. I got responsibility. When he stayed out late, it was boys will be boys. When I got a B+, they asked why I wasn't focused. No one ever called it favoritism, but I felt it in every small thing. Who sat in the front seat, who got asked how their day was, who got believed without explaining. I never asked for more, just to be seen the same. But maybe that was the first thing I gave up believing I deserved to be equal. I met Kyle when I was 26. He was charming, confident, everything I wasn't. He said he loved my calm, my loyalty, my quiet strength. I believed him. At first, he made me feel seen. He opened doors, paid attention, listened. But slowly his tone changed. "You let people walk all over you, Grace. You're too soft. That's why no one takes you seriously." I laughed it off. Thought marriage meant compromise, thought maybe he was right. But over the years, his words stopped feeling like help and started sounding like judgment. Still, I stayed, because I thought love meant staying, because I thought being a wife meant enduring. And when I told him about the will, how Jacob got the house, he didn't comfort me. He looked at me like I confirmed every doubt he ever had about who I was. That night, I stood at the sink, hands trembling over a stack of unwashed dishes. Kyle sat in the living room TV, glowing arms crossed like I was a burden. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. "You're not surprised, are you?" he said. "They've never seen you as equal?" I stayed silent. But something inside me cracked, not because he was wrong, but because it felt like the final proof. He stood, walked past me, and before closing the bedroom door, he said, "Maybe when you start standing up for yourself, they'll start seeing your worth." That was the moment. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet kind of pain that sits in your chest and tells you this life isn't yours anymore. So I packed a bag, grabbed the old car keys, and drove toward the only thing I'd been given, the cabin in Montana. The road to Cold Ridge twisted through forests and fog. No cell signal, no signs of life for miles. By the time I reached the cabin, the sky was a bruised purple and the wind carried the scent of pine and dust. It looked worse than I imagined, peeling paint, sagging, porch one shutter hanging loose. But I didn't feel fear. I felt still, like something had been waiting. I stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. The key the lawyer gave me was old and rusted. I slid it into the lock. It stuck. I pushed harder, and the door groaned open. The smell hit first mildew, wood rot, something forgotten. Inside was dark and silent, like the house was holding its breath. I should have felt like a stranger. But deep down, something whispered, "You've been here before," even if I hadn't. The floor creaked beneath me like it remembered footsteps from long ago. Dust floated in the air, catching the light that slipped through holes in the roof. An old table stood in the center legs, uneven, covered in a thin layer of ash. A broken chair leaned beside it, as if someone had left in a hurry and never came back. No photos, no signs of who had once lived here, just silence and the soft ticking of my own breath. I walked through the kitchen, drawers swollen shut, an iron kettle still hanging over the cold fireplace. It wasn't just abandoned, it had been forgotten. And yet every wall seemed to watch me, like it knew I hadn't come here by chance. I set down my bag, picked up my flashlight, and told myself quietly, you didn't come this far just to leave empty. At the end of the narrow hallway, I found a door unlike the rest. Thicker, heavier. Its wood darkened with age, carved with patterns, circles, feathers, something like flowing rivers. I ran my fingers across the lines, feeling a strange warmth beneath the dust. None of the keys fit. I tried every one. Wiggled, forced, nothing. It was sealed, not just physically, but like it wasn't ready to open. Frustrated, I sat down on the floor, my flashlight flickering on the carvings. Why would my parents give me this place and never mention it? Why this house? Why now? Then I noticed it, a small crack along the bottom edge, just wide enough to hide something. I pressed gently. The wood gave way. Behind the panel, a narrow gap. Dark, silent, calling. I leaned closer, heart pounding like a drum, and crawled in. The space was tight. Dust clung to the air, thick and undisturbed. I crawled through on my elbows, knees scraping wood, heart thudding with every inch. Then open space. A hidden room. No windows, no light but my flickering beam. Wooden shelves lined the walls, holding objects I'd never seen, painted pottery, folded cloth, a drum covered in animal hide. In the corner stood a chest, its lid carved with a wolf howling under a crescent moon. My breath caught. These weren't just old things. They felt sacred, heavy with meaning. I reached for a feathered headdress, white plumes still pure despite the dust. Next to it, a leather-bound book. The name on the first page stopped me, Eleanor Tall Feathers. Below it, a date, August 15th, 1947. My hands trembled. This wasn't junk. This was a story, my story, that had been buried on purpose. The pages smelled of smoke and time, soft, yellowed, fragile under my fingers. I turned to the first entry. The handwriting was strong, deliberate, not rushed, not afraid. To the women who come after me, if they ever let you see this, know that your blood is sacred. I stopped breathing. She wrote of ceremonies under stars, songs sung in a language I didn't know. She wrote of silence, how her name was erased the day she married outside the tribe. They told me I had to choose be a wife or a woman of the people, but I was always both. My chest tightened. No one ever told me we had native roots, that our family once belonged to the Crow Nation. I thought I'd come here to claim a house, but what I'd found was a name they never wanted me to remember. I sat on the cold floor, the journal open in my lap, hands resting on history I never knew was mine. Eleanor Tall Feathers, my great-grandmother, erased from family stories, not because she did wrong, but because she didn't fit what the world expected a woman to be. She chose spirit over silence, roots over comfort, and they buried her memory like they buried this room behind a locked door. I felt shame rise up, then something stronger behind it. Pride. For the first time, I wasn't just someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone who got left behind. I was part of something older, something fierce. I ran my fingers over her name again, saying it out loud just to hear it fill the air. Eleanor Tall Feathers. She had not disappeared. She was waiting for someone, a woman like me, to remember her. I didn't sleep that night. The journal sat beside me like a heartbeat. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I searched online for Native history experts in Montana, universities, museums, tribal centers. One name kept appearing after Mary Winters, an anthropologist specializing in Indigenous women's histories. I sent an email, short, careful, unsure how to even begin. I found artifacts in a cabin that belonged to my family. There's a name, Eleanor Tall Feathers. I think she was Crow. I don't know what to do next, she replied within hours. Her message was simple. Where are you? I'd like to come to see. For the first time in days, I felt something lift, like I wasn't alone with this. I didn't know what she'd find, but I knew this much: if Eleanor left this behind, it wasn't to be hidden forever. She showed up the next morning, tall, silver-haired, wearing hiking boots and a denim jacket. Her handshake was firm, her eyes curious but kind. We didn't waste time. I led her through the narrow hall into the hidden room. She stood still for a long moment, didn't speak, just really looked at everything. The pottery, the feathered headdress, the chest with the wolf, Eleanor's journal on the floor. Then she whispered, "Do you know what you found?" I shook my head. She walked slowly to the shelf, picked up a beaded cloth, held it like something holy. "These are not just family heirlooms," she said. "These are cultural treasures. They were meant to survive." I didn't know whether to cry or apologize, but Dr. Winters just smiled at me, not with pity, but with recognition. "Let's find out who your grandmother really was." We sat at the old table, Eleanor's journal between us, pages open like a doorway. Dr. Winters flipped through, slowly reading, nodding sometimes, closing her eyes like she could feel the weight behind the words. "Eleanor Tall Feathers was Crow," she said, "from a matrilineal line where women led, passed down knowledge, held stories. But in the 1930s, reservation pressure grew. Ceremonies were banned, girls were sent to boarding schools, women like Eleanor were told to choose assimilation or erasure. When she married outside the tribe, Dr. Winters said, they cut her off, but she didn't forget. She hid these things so they wouldn't be destroyed." I looked at the headdress again, at the worn drum, and realized this wasn't just family history, it was resistance. Every item in this room was proof that Eleanor refused to disappear. I stayed in the room long after Dr. Winters left. The quiet wasn't empty anymore, it was full of her, of Eleanor, of a woman no one ever spoke of, but who lived louder in silence than most do in speech. I looked around and thought, she wasn't just hiding these things, she was saving them for me. For someone who'd been told to stay small, to be agreeable, polite, to never cause trouble, this felt like the first time I could breathe. I wasn't just Grace, the overlooked daughter, the quiet wife. I was someone's legacy, the continuation of a line that refused to be erased. I whispered her name again, not out of curiosity this time, but pride. "Eleanor, I see you now." And for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, she saw me too. The next morning, I stood on the porch watching the fog lift off the trees. Everything felt different. Not because the cabin had changed, but because I had. I pulled up the Crow Nation website, found a number for the Cultural Preservation Office. My hand shook as I dialed. A woman answered. Warm voice. Patient. I told her my name. Told her about the cabin, the artifacts, the journal. There was a pause, then she said, "You need to speak with Samuel Running Elk. He's one of our elders. He may know your family." She gave me a number. For a moment I hesitated. What if they didn't want me? What if I wasn't enough to claim this history? But then I remembered Eleanor. She never stopped believing in what she carried, even when no one stood with her. So I picked up the phone and called. He arrived 2 days later, driving a dusty pickup, his silver braid tied with red cloth. I stood at the porch, unsure of what to say. Samuel looked at me for a long moment, not with judgment, but like he was remembering something. "You're Eleanor's blood," he said quietly. Not a question, a knowing. I nodded. He nodded back like we'd just agreed on something sacred. Inside the hidden room, he walked slow, careful, touching each item as if greeting old friends. When he saw the headdress, his eyes filled with something I couldn't name. Pain, joy, maybe both. "These were never lost," he whispered. "They were waiting." He turned to me. "She believed someone would come back for them. Someone with her heart, her silence, her fire." I didn't know what to say, but I felt it. For the first time, I belonged. We sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees, gold light spilling over the mountains. Samuel spoke softly, like each word carried someone else's voice. "Eleanor was one of our last women keepers," he said. "She knew the songs, the plants, the ceremonies. She could call rain with just a drum beat." He paused, looking out toward the horizon. "But they told her she had to leave it all behind. They called her dangerous because she remembered." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Did people hate her?" I asked. Samuel shook his head. "No, we missed her, but the world made it hard to hold on to women like her. They scared people because they didn't bow." He looked at me, then his gaze steady. "She didn't bow, Grace, and you came back. Maybe that's what she was waiting for all along." After Samuel left, I stayed in the room for hours, surrounded by what she saved. These weren't just artifacts. They were pieces of breath of memory. Things women weren't allowed to carry but did anyway. The old drum still made a sound, low, alive. When I tapped it, the vibration moved through my chest. This wasn't about ownership, it was about responsibility. I thought about Jacob, about the house in Denver, the money, about how I'd left feeling like I had nothing. But now I knew I'd inherited something far greater. Not just a cabin, but the silence that needed breaking, the stories that deserved voices, the fire my grandmother left glowing beneath the ashes. And for the first time in my life, I wanted to do more than understand the past. I wanted to protect it, out loud, and with both hands. The next morning, I swept the dust from the floor with an old broom I found behind the cabin. Each stroke felt like something was lifting not just dirt, but the weight of forgetting. I made a list, sealed the roof, fixed the windows, replaced the rotting boards. Not to make the house pretty, but to make it whole. This place didn't need to be sold or hidden. It needed to breathe again. I used my savings to buy supplies from the nearest town, paint tools, a tarp for the roof. The man at the counter asked, "Fixing it up for resale?" I shook my head. Fixing it up for remembering. That night, I hammered the first nail into the broken porch beam. The sound echoed into the trees. And I swear, for just a second, I felt Eleanor's hand rest lightly on my shoulder. The repairs gave my hands purpose, but my mind kept reaching further. What if this place could be more than just a house I fixed up alone? What if it could speak not just to me, but to every woman who'd ever been told to be quiet? I called Samuel again, told him my idea. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "You're not just restoring a building, Grace. You're waking up a memory." We met the next day. He brought tea, a folded blanket, and the names of women from the Crow Nation weavers, storytellers, singers. "They've waited years for a space to pass things down," he said. "Maybe this is it." I looked around the cabin, still cracked, still worn, but alive. And for the first time, I didn't just feel connected to Eleanor, I felt ready to continue her work. They arrived in pairs, hands full of fabric beads, small drums, and stories. Rose White Deer, a weaver whose fingers moved like water. Lena Two Moons, a teacher who hadn't spoken her language aloud in 20 years. And Clara, who didn't say much at all, just brought a worn photograph of her grandmother in full regalia, standing proud. We sat in the room Eleanor built, surrounded by memory. No one rushed, no one led, we just listened. They didn't ask if I was native enough. They didn't question my last name. They saw Eleanor in my hands, that was enough. Rose looked at the feathered headdress and said, "She hid this so we could wear it again." I didn't have all the answers, but I had space, and a door no longer locked. The house was waking up, and I wasn't alone anymore. Segment 23. Restoring what was meant to last, 150 words. We worked side by side, no blueprints, no timelines, just hand stories and the sound of hammers in rhythm. We patched the roof with pine boards, scrubbed smoke-stained walls until the wood shone again. Lena painted a sun above the doorway, not decorative, but symbolic. "New light for old names," she said. In the evenings, we sat outside on folding chairs, drinking tea, sharing quiet. No one asked what I used to do. They only asked what I wanted to build. And slowly I changed, not into someone else, but into who I might have been if I'd never been told to shrink. I still had doubts, still felt like a guest in my own story, but each time I opened Eleanor's journal, each time I heard the women laugh inside these walls, I felt my place growing strong, like roots breaking through stone. It started as a quiet idea, but now it had a name, the Tall Feather Center, a space for women to gather to teach the songs and stories that had once been silenced. We cleared the back room, turned it into a circle space, no chairs, just woven mats and open air. Clara brought her grandmother's shawl and hung it by the window. She would have come here every day, she said. We planned classes language beating herbal medicine, things Eleanor once knew by heart. I printed flyers, nailed them to trees, left them in cafes across Coldridge. Not everyone understood, not everyone approved, but that didn't stop us. This wasn't about proving anything, it was about protecting something, something alive, something sacred, something passed from hand to hand through silence fire and now through us. He pulled up in a new SUV, windows tinted, music still playing when he stepped out. Same confident walk, same practiced smile. I hadn't seen him since the will was read. Didn't expect to. "So, this is it," he said, glancing around. The famous old shack you traded your life for. I stayed silent, let him fill the air with sarcasm. He walked toward the house, peeked through a window, noticed the circle room, the restored walls, and the headdress hanging in quiet dignity. People are talking, he said. Some professor told a friend in real estate these artifacts could be worth a fortune. He looked at me, then serious now. You're not thinking of just keeping all this, are you? I felt the old fear stir the need to avoid conflict, but something stronger rose with it. I looked him in the eye. They were never yours to take. Jacob stepped closer, voice lower now, like we were conspiring. Look, Grace, I'll cut you in. We sell the items, split it 50-50. You keep the house, I'll keep the cash. He smiled like he was offering a gift. Like I should be grateful. You don't even know what this stuff is, he added. Let the experts handle it. Museums, collectors, this is their world, not yours. I took a breath, steadying myself, felt the floor under my feet, felt Eleanor's name inside my chest. You think it's about value, I said, but this isn't a collection. It's a memory, a voice, a line of women who were never allowed to speak. Jacob scoffed. You always were sentimental. That's why they gave it to you, not because they believed in you, but because no one else wanted it. I didn't flinch. Then they were wrong, because I do. After Jacob left, his words lingered like smoke. No one else wanted it. Let the experts handle it. I stared at the headdress in the circle room, its feathers catching the soft morning light. He was wrong, but part of me still wavered. The money could fix a lot. Pay off Kyle's debts, start fresh somewhere far from all this. But when I opened Eleanor's journal again, I found a line I hadn't noticed before. If we trade our stories for comfort, we teach our daughters to do the same. My hands stopped shaking. This wasn't just about holding on. It was about refusing to pass down silence. I stood, walked to the chest, and gently closed the lid. Not everything sacred is meant to be sold. I said it aloud, not for Jacob, for myself, and for whoever comes after me. He wore a pressed suit and polished shoes, didn't bother to hide the briefcase, introduced himself as a representative of a private museum in Chicago, said he'd heard about the artifacts, called them a lost piece of American history. We're prepared to offer $3 million, he said, laying a business card on the table. Display rights, full climate control, your family name on the exhibit. He spoke like a salesman, but with practiced reverence, a tone made for convincing. These objects deserve to be seen protected by professionals, not left to rot in a cabin. I let him talk, let him fill the room with numbers and prestige, but my eyes stayed on the drum behind him, the one that still held sound, the one no one asked permission to touch. You want to honor them, I said quietly, then leave them where they still have breath. Words spread faster than I expected, not the money, the refusal. Women started showing up with baskets of food, folded blankets, quiet nods of respect. Rose brought cedar branches, laid them outside the door. For protection, she said. Not for the house, for your heart. Lena taught a group of girls how to bead again. Their laughter filled the same room a stranger had called too fragile for meaning. Samuel returned, sat beside me in the circle. We didn't speak for a while. Then he said, Now you know what Eleanor knew, that protecting something doesn't always look like a fight. Sometimes it looks like standing still. I felt something settle inside me. This wasn't about courage anymore. It was about continuity, about knowing that even if I fall, the story won't. The call came late. His name lit up my screen like a ghost. Kyle. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks. Still smooth, still sure of itself. Grace. I heard what you've been doing. The house, the artifacts the museum offers, it's all over the news. He paused, waited for my approval, my attention, the old rhythm. You should come back. We can start fresh. This time you'll be taken seriously. I stood at the window watching moonlight touch the cedar Rose had left. I am taken seriously, I said. Just not by you. He didn't expect that. Didn't know this version of me. Grace, don't be foolish. This won't last. You're still just... I ended the call before he finished. Not in anger, not in fear, but because I knew I was no longer living a life waiting for permission. The flyers went up across the valley, Tall Feathers Cultural Center, Opening ceremony, June 12th. No sponsors, no big headlines, just word of mouth passed hand to hand. I didn't stand at the front of the room. Didn't need to. But when people asked who started this, eyes turned to me. Not out of fame, but recognition. Rose handed me a ribbon to cut. Lena placed a shawl around my shoulders. "You built something from memory," she whispered. "That's harder than building from money." I looked around at what we'd made, walls repaired by women's hands, artifacts given breath again, a circle filled with song, not silence. No one called me soft, no one asked me to shrink, and if they had, I wouldn't have known how, because I had found my place, not by becoming someone new, but by finally returning to myself. They came early. Mothers with daughters, grandmothers in woven shawls, teenagers who had never heard their own language spoken aloud. The air smelled of cedar and sweetgrass. A drum echoed softly in the distance. Samuel lit the sacred tobacco. Smoke rose like a quiet prayer, upward, steady, unashamed. "This is not just a place," he said. "It's a remembering. No speeches, just stories. Told in circles, held without interruption." A child placed her fingers on the old drum, startled at the sound it still carried. "Was this really yours?" she asked me. I smiled. It was never just mine. It was waiting for all of us. And in that moment, as laughter filled the rooms and a young girl tried her first beading stitch, I felt what Eleanor must have hoped for, that what they buried would someday rise again, held by women who would not forget. I stood before the crowd, heart pounding but steady. I told them about the cabin, the locked door, the hidden room, about Eleanor, the woman who was erased but never really gone. I spoke of silence, how I learned to live in it, how I almost let it define me. But then I said, strength doesn't mean never being afraid. It means choosing to speak anyway. The room was quiet, then applause, soft at first, then growing louder. A young woman approached me afterward, eyes shining, holding a beaded necklace. "Thank you," she said, "for showing me I can be proud, that my voice matters." In that moment, I wasn't just Grace, the quiet daughter or the woman left behind. I was a storyteller, a keeper of legacy, a woman who had finally come home. Days passed in quiet rhythms, teaching, beading, sharing stories, learning songs. I still stumbled over words in Crow, mispronounced sacred names, but laughter filled the room, turning mistakes into moments of connection. One afternoon, Rose invited me to her home, where children's hands wove threads of lightning and sun. Watching them, I felt a deep joy, not from success, but from trying, from no longer shrinking, but growing. At night, I'd sit alone in the secret room, holding Eleanor's journal, wondering if I was truly worthy. Then I'd remember Samuel's words. "Strength is not the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it." And I would smile knowing this was only the beginning. That the legacy wasn't just in the past, it was alive, growing in every stitch, every song, every story told. Just as hope blossomed, a letter arrived. Jacob's lawyer, claiming co-ownership of the cabin, arguing the will was unclear. My heart sank. I thought the fight was over, but it was only beginning. Samuel sat with me on the porch, the evening wind carrying the scent of pine. "They want to test your strength," he said quietly. "But remember, the eagle flies highest against the wind." I felt the weight of his words settle like a shield around my shoulders. The lawsuit wasn't just about the house. It was about proving who I was, what I stood for. And I knew if I faltered now, all the stories, all the songs would risk fading again. I wasn't just fighting for a building. I was fighting for my voice, for Eleanor's legacy, for every woman waiting to be seen. I hired a lawyer who understood more than just contracts. She understood what was at stake. Every meeting brought new papers, new questions, new doubts. Late nights, I pored over Eleanor's journal, finding strength in her words when my own faltered. Kyle called again, offering help, money advice, a way out. But I refused. This wasn't about convenience. It was about justice. Samuel visited, often reminding me to breathe, to stay grounded. Sometimes the fight felt too big, like I was a single flame against a storm. But then I remembered eagles don't wait for the storm to pass. They learn to soar through it, and with every step, I felt myself rising, not just for me, but for everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong. The courthouse felt cold, sterile, nothing like the warmth of the cabin's walls. Jacob sat across from me, smiling like this was a game he was certain to win. When it was my turn to speak, I told the judge my story, not just about the will, but about Eleanor, the artifacts, and what this legacy meant. I spoke of silence and strength, of stories passed down in whispers and the fight to keep them alive. Jacob talked about money, about property, about rights, but the judge listened to me. Not just my words, but the conviction behind them. When the verdict came, it wasn't just a win for me. It was a victory for every quiet voice waiting to be heard. I walked out of that courtroom feeling lighter, stronger, finally free. Back at the cabin, word of the verdict spread like wildfire. Women arrived with food, with songs, with smiles, full of pride. We gathered around a bonfire, the night sky a blanket of stars above us. Samuel led a prayer calling on ancestors to witness our strength. Rose and Lena sang old songs, their voices weaving through the trees, carrying hope and healing. I stood among them feeling the warmth, not just from the fire, but from the community, from every woman who refused to be silent. For the first time, I didn't feel like the daughter who was passed over. I was Grace Anderson, a keeper of stories, a guardian of legacies, a woman who had finally found her voice. And in their eyes, I saw the promise of tomorrow. The days after the celebration were filled with quiet purpose. I began writing, chronicling Eleanor's story, my journey, and the women who stood beside me. This wasn't just about preserving the past, it was about shaping the future. The Tall Feathers Center became more than a building. It became a movement, a place where girls could learn their language, where women could reclaim their voices, where history was not something to hide, but something to celebrate. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more battles to fight. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid, because I carried more than a name. I carried a legacy, and I was ready to pass it on not as silence, but as a song. When I first stood before that crumbling cabin, I was lost. A daughter overlooked, a woman silenced. But through dust and silence, I found a voice, not just my own, but one that echoes through generations. This journey taught me strength isn't loud. It's quiet, persistent, rooted deep in who we are. If you've ever been told you don't belong or that your story doesn't matter, know this. Your voice is a legacy waiting to be heard. If Grace's story touched you, if you faced silence and chose to rise, comment below. I am ready to be heard. Together we can build a world where every story, especially the quiet forgotten ones, can shine. The journey doesn't end here. It begins anew. If Grace's journey inspired you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story matters here too. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story of strength and hope. Together we'll keep these voices alive.